95% of Republicans, but also 71% of Democrats like this idea. So why do you not?
It's Jim Crow 2.0. What they're trying to do here is the same thing that was done in the South for decades to prevent people of color from voting.
Who would not want voter ID? Only somebody that wants to cheat. Think of it. We don't have voter ID. And the Democrats don't want it. And the reason they don't want it is because they want to cheat. Because there's no reason in the world, and I love that debate, Lindsay. I love saying, well, why don't you want voter ID? And you watch them say, I don't know, I just
make them vote.
Then it's a terrible thing.
So I want to discuss the SAVE Act and the whole battle over voter ID that is currently taking place in Washington, because essentially what's happening is that Republicans are currently attempting to pass very common sense legislation that would mandate voter ID and proof of citizenship in order to vote in national elections, to which Democrats have responded by threatening to shut down the government again, calling it a moral abomination, and even comparing it to Jim Crow and the literacy tests of that era. Again, folks, we're referring here to legislation that mandates you show a government ID to vote and prove citizenship in order to register to vote. That's all that it does, and apparently this is a Jim Crow era abomination. Now, I have to say, this might be the most mask-off moment by Democrats that we've ever seen on this issue. Don't get me wrong, I think they've been quietly admitting it for years, but now here they're saying it publicly, because after all, if you're claiming you're not cheating, then why exactly are you so violently angry when we simply pass legislation that would block you from cheating? And of course, the argument that you often hear from liberal media, I'm sure the Washington Post will write some type of article about this, is all about how, well, the Republicans are conspiracy theorists because voter fraud is exceedingly rare in America, so they're basically responding to a problem that doesn't exist. To which I say, what? What kind of argument even is that? Oh, just because something is supposedly rare, therefore there shouldn't be laws against it? That's like arguing that, well, this county has a very low murder rate, so therefore we shouldn't have laws that make murder illegal. No, obviously, you should still illegalize criminality. I don't understand. Or like saying that, well, clearly the crime rate there is very low, so they don't need a police department at all for any reason. No, obviously you should still have a police department even if it's not all that common what's happening. But then secondly, how can you even argue that you know for a fact voter fraud is exceedingly rare in this country if you don't really have good measures to check for it, investigate it, or stop it? After all, let's actually make an analogy that maybe Democrats can understand or relate to. It would be like if a certain presidential administration had practiced an open border policy, a bunch of people they don't know and never were able to verify poured over that open border, and then you go back and say, well, we know for a fact that a very low number of terrorists, only about 2,000 of them or something like that, but not a lot of terrorists actually came over the border. That's exceedingly rare. Well, if you never checked the people and it was an open border, how can you know for a fact that not a lot of terrorists came over the border? It's an open border. Same argument to be made here on voter ID, but it seems like Democrats obviously seem to be a pretty big fan of these things. But nonetheless, I want to tell you all about this here today, right? We'll inform you about the SAVE Act. We'll show you the ridiculous Chuck Schumer meltdown he's been having about all of it, right? Basically a vain attempt to spread misinformation. Oh, well, it's Jim Crow. Look, they're trying to restrict voting, and how even the folks over at MSNBC, or I guess MS Now, are calling him out on it, as well as the dirty games they're employing in Washington to essentially, keep elections insecure while claiming, of course, that the elections are completely secure. Let's get into all of it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And that said, let's, I guess, go over briefly what the SAVE Act does. We do have an update. Apparently, some Republican representatives, including Mike Lee, have just introduced an amendment that will add the voter ID provision. So that's going to be now a nationwide policy if this were to pass, right? Obviously, you have to show a real government-issued ID to vote, considering the fact that many states, California included, do not mandate them. Actually, as a matter of fact, in California, the election workers are banned from even asking for an ID. But of course, they claim that their election system is completely secure because we don't know about voter fraud happening, as we have an election system that is obviously insecure. But nonetheless, the main provision, ladies and gentlemen, of the SAVE Act, again, will be the fact that it would mandate proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. What does that mean? Well, essentially, if it were to pass, every time now you go to register to vote for the first time or a new registration, whatever it is, you would have to bring either, let's say, a passport or a birth certificate in order to vote, right? Because that will basically prove the citizenship. They argue here that even a driver's license, considering it's issued by the states, might not even be valid in that case. You need some form of federal identification, right? So that's all that it does. Now, some people can obviously look at that and say, well, that sounds like a lot of work. I guess in some cases it is, right? Not everybody has their passport. Not everybody has their birth certificate. But ladies and gentlemen, after all, if you don't have one, then you know what you can do? You can go get one. It's not that difficult, okay? Actually, as a matter of fact, passports, I will say, because I never got a passport till I was 21 years old. This was about almost close to 2 years ago now. They take a lot quicker to process now than they used to. A lot of people from the old days say, oh, it takes 3 to 4 months to mail a passport. Mine came in, I think, 3 to 4 weeks and exactly on time. So it's not really that. It's very doable, okay? You want a passport, you need a replacement of your birth certificate. These things are all feasible. Now, I fully understand that in a certain sense, I guess liberals are right. Yes, that will make it harder to vote. But after all, isn't that the entire point, right? Why should someone be voting in an election who is apparently too lazy or doesn't care enough to even do something as basic as, oh, let me get a replacement document if I'm not able to acquire it basically on hand? Because let me be clear, voting is, or at least should be, a very serious and informed decision. There's a reason why most societies throughout human history did not practice democracy, because it can be incredibly dangerous. And if you're going to practice it, then it's very incumbent on people to actually kind of know what they're doing. You need an educated and informed populace to even have anything resembling a democratic system and expecting that government to survive. And so if Democrats are going to make the case that, well, our voters are too lazy, stupid, and don't care enough to go get a passport or get any identifying document from the federal government, but they should be voting, is that not essentially an admission on their part? Even if they want to claim, oh, that's the reason why, it's not because we're, just manipulating elections. Okay, fine, right? Then what you're basically saying is that your electorate is comprised of a bunch of uninformed, uneducated, dumb, uninvolved people who are basically just voting for the sake of voting and, don't actually care about the country, or they don't really take the decision all that seriously, et cetera, which pretty clearly indicates that, your party is essentially destroying the country, right? If you have to build a coalition on essentially uninformed people, third worlders who can't even speak the national language of our country, all this garbage, right? Then clearly you're probably not the good guys, okay? And that's not actually the function of what healthy democracy looks like. Healthy democracies don't basically go to subliterate people and say, hey, vote for this candidate. We'll give you free food and, government welfare. But I guess that's frankly how Democrats maintain power. Of course, virtue signaling about all these words like democracy, when in reality, whether it's voter ID or even proof of citizenship, these ideas are overwhelmingly supported, ladies and gentlemen, by the American population. Take a listen.
Photo ID to vote, and the American people are with Nicki Minaj, because what are we talking about here? So take a look here. Favor voter ID to vote. Look, I got all this polling on the screen going back since 2018. You'll notice on all of it, it's all north of 75%, 76%, 76%, 76%, 81%, and then 83% in the last year of Americans agree with Nicki Minaj. They favor photo ID to be able to vote.
What about by party? What's the party breakdown?
Yeah, normally you might expect, hey, there'd be a big divide by party with Republicans really for it and Democrats really against it. But not really here. I mean, just take a look here. Favor photo ID to vote. You got 95% of Republicans, pretty much all of them, but even 71% of Democrats favor photo ID to vote. So again, Nicki Minaj posting that on X, and what you see is that the American people, actually, it's not really all that controversial. The American people are with Nicki Minaj, whether they are Republican or even if they are Democrats. We're talking about 7 in 10 Democrats agreeing with Nicki Minaj that you, in fact, should show a voter photo ID to vote.
Right. So we have the party of democracy, quote unquote, who looks at a policy that's overwhelmingly supported by 83% of Americans, including the vast majority of their own voters, almost 3/4 of their own voters support voter ID, and say, no, we're against voter ID because that would be against democracy. Well, how is it even against democracy if the majority of America, by huge numbers, supports the policy, number one? And then number two, again, I say, apparently this is the type of quote-unquote democracy that Democrats want, right? The argument is that, oh, well, we want higher voter turnout. Everybody should be voting. And even if that's, the real reason and not just the fact that, they're up to no good. Okay, I again say, if you're dealing with people who are too stupid or too dumb or too lazy to get an ID or get a passport or get a birth certificate, any of these identifying documents, why should they be voting in elections? How is that virtuous, by the way? How do you look? Oh, the numbers are higher. Okay, but at the end of the day, we're trying to pick leaders. How on earth does that type of person making a completely uninformed decision translate to supposedly getting good leadership? I guess in that case, they would elect Democrats, which is the entire point, but seems to me to be pretty antithetical to the actual concept of good leadership. By the way, last point I'd like to make about this, okay? A couple years ago, I had to change driver's licenses because I moved states, okay, which I'm legally required to do. You know what one of the required documents was, folks? A birth certificate, right? So, legally, I'm required to present a birth certificate in many different cases where I'm dealing with the government or changing residency or whatever, just as I'm required to show a government ID if I go to buy alcohol or board a plane or check into a hotel. But, voting, arguably the most important civic practice in our country. No, that's going to be too hard on the third worlders, right? Are we sure the Somali Quality Learning Center educated kids will know how to go out and, register to vote and do all these? I guess that's why Democrats support things like automatic voter registration and not requiring an ID to vote and all these things. So there you have it, right? And now take a listen, of course, to the way Chuck Schumer is framing this common sense legislation.
We've got to get this done, and we've got to get it done very quickly. The SAVE Act is an abomination. It's Jim Crow 2.0 across the country. We are going to do everything we can to stop it.
Leader Schumer, you recently called the SAVE Act Jim Crow. Can you explain how it's Jim Crow to require an ID to vote in elections, to drive a car, to purchase alcohol, go to the DMV? Any comment on that?
Leader Schumer, you said you're on the same page as...
It's a Jim Crow abomination. Well, I guess 71% of Democrat voters support Jim Crow and segregation, apparently. All to do what? Voter ID and proof of citizenship. Verifying that you're actually eligible to vote is just like Jim Crow. Now, I'll be completely honest. I wouldn't even have a problem with reinstituting literacy tests, okay? I think they actually might be pretty necessary in modern America. I understand that back in the day, maybe they were selectively or unequally applied. I'm fine. Look, everyone has to take a civic literacy test. I don't actually see that as a bad thing. But, okay. Even then, we're not requiring literacy tests. There's no poll tax or anything like that. There's no manipulative things going on. No, it's that every American, not some of them, not just the black ones or the Latino ones or even the Somali ones, every American under this law, when they go to register to vote, would be required to do those things. And then when they, of course, vote at the polls, they have to show a government ID. That's Jim Crow for you. Now, of course, the argument sounds pretty stupid because it is, and Schumer quite clearly is incapable of actually arguing the substance of what the SAVE Act does or says because, frankly, Democrats don't have an argument, right? It's just really dumb. Even most Democrat voters, as you can see, reject the argument that, the minorities are too stupid to get ID or something like that. So that's how you can just basically lazily cite U.S. history and say, well, anything making voting requirements more stricter is just like Jim Crow, because did you know they did that during Jim Crow, right? Compare two completely different things, even with no similarities, but Democrats do that a lot, right? Because they're rhetorically lazy. But take a listen here, even on MS Now, as MS Now confronts Chuck Schumer, basically asking, how can this be Jim Crow? And how can this be such a terrible thing when it's so overwhelmingly supported by so many Americans? By the way, you're the party of democracy, right?
So, Leader Schumer, this talk about election security has revived discussions of the SAVE Act. which you have said you oppose. Proponents of it say that it's, to have ID, you have to prove U.S. citizenship to be able to vote, though some of the claims they make, to be clear, are overstated. We know there's not widespread election fraud. But polling does suggest, there's a new Pew Research poll, that 95% of Republicans, but also 71% of Democrats like this idea. So why do you not?
It's Jim Crow 2.0. And I called it Jim Crow 2.0, and the right wing went nuts all over the internet. That's because they know it's true. What they're trying to do here is the same thing that was done in the South for decades to prevent people of color from voting. For instance, if you change, you're a woman who got married and changed your last name, you won't be able to show ID and you'll be discriminated against. If you can't find a birth certificate or a proper ID, you'll be discriminated against. This is vicious and nasty. And I said to our Republican colleagues, it will not pass the Senate. You will not get a single Democratic vote in the Senate. We're not reviving Jim Crow all over the country.
No, actually, we didn't go crazy because we all secretly knew it was true. We went crazy because of how dumb it sounds. And by the way, how dumb you sound. Notice how he can't even really make the argument coherently. He's just stumbling over himself. It's Jim Crow because it's Jim Crow or something like that. It's not, right? First of all, as it pertains to the whole argument, oh, what if you get married and change your name? Okay. So you bring the birth certificate, you bring the marriage certificate, and any other documents necessary to show I changed my name, but I'm still the same exact person. People change their names in America all the time. And yeah, they have to update driver's licenses, passports, accounts, things like that. It's not unprecedented, Chuck Schumer, okay? These things happen and they've happened before. And by the way, though, right? Isn't the argument around... So your initial argument was, this is going to stop people of color from voting, and that's why it's racist, and that's why it's Jim Crow. Okay, last I checked, it's not only black people or people of color who get married and change their name, okay? Everybody does that. So can you please name a specific case or instance on how it's intentionally discriminatory against minorities? Because that's the argument about Jim Crow voter legislation, right? At least that's what they try to say. They say intentionally discriminated or set up to discriminate against black people. If you're applying equal requirements to people of all races, and people of all races, by the way, change their names or lose their birth certificates, where's the discrimination against people of color? He didn't even cite that, right? He's just like, what if you get married? What if you can't find your birth certificate? Everybody deals with that stuff, right? So yes, again, is it true that we're quote unquote making it harder to vote? Yeah, I mean, that's you have to do more factually to make it to go and vote, right? But where is the evidence at all that it's in any ways Jim Crow in the sense that, as he points out, it's intentionally discriminating against minorities? It's just straight up not. It doesn't exist, Minorities don't have birth certificates. They're born in the United States. Everyone born in the United States has a birth certificate, right? I don't know. Do they think this is the 1800s or something? Black Americans in Georgia, they're born in the bathtub, all of it. Like, what are you talking about? No, the only people who wouldn't have birth certificates or passports or other documents verifying citizenship, this is going to be a crazy thought, perhaps are not citizens. Yeah, it's not hard to understand. It's not complicated. Just so ridiculous, even as he tries to make the Jim Crow argument, it doesn't make sense what he's saying, right? I don't know. But anyways, that said, it is worth noting, however, the unfortunate reality is that there is a ton of drama right now as it pertains to the filibuster, because as Chuck Schumer points out, Democrats are making it clear they will not provide any of the necessary 60 votes that would be required to pass voter ID and pass the SAVE Act.
The coin in the realm in the Senate is floor time. There's a finite amount of it, and we have a lot of things we have to do. There's a housing bill that's awaiting action, hopefully a market structure bill, possibly permitting reform. As I said, we will vote on the SAVE Act, but exercising or triggering a talking filibuster has ramifications, implications that I think everybody needs to be aware of. So we will have those discussions, but that's obviously ties the floor up for an indefinite amount of time with not only unlimited debate, but also unlimited amendments.
Yeah, so typical GOP with the excuses. Up until about 2 seconds ago, they were very adamant. We're going to pass the SAVE Act. It's something that's been spoken about actually for several years. And suddenly now the Democrats give them a single droplet of resistance. And now they're saying, we don't know if we can get it done because the parliamentary rules or these other bills that we need to pass and all this stuff. Have you all, by the way, also noticed that the filibuster very often is just an excuse for the Republicans to sit there and do nothing? So let me just say that this is something that needs to pass, okay? It's existential. There's a reason why the Democrats are fighting so hard against it, because it's important. And let me just say, right, where's the GOP's sense of self-preservation at all? You know, it's one thing to say, well, it's an election year and we don't know if we want to pass something too conservative because maybe it'll piss people off. Okay, but this is a law that directly affects elections. You understand, right? First of all, it's very unlikely to draw an actual political backlash because, after all, it's overwhelmingly supported by Americans. But even if Americans get pissed at it, guess what? They have to be pissed off enough at it to actually go through the new requirements to vote, which is part of the entire point of this, you know? So you're talking about a law that will help Republicans in the election, most likely. And Democrats clearly seem to think so. That's why they're protesting so hard, right? And the Republicans claiming, oh, it's an election year, are saying, well, we don't know if we have time to pass it. Even if you're a completely selfish politician who just wants to win election, wouldn't you think this is like the one thing you should get done, right? Forget immigration, forget economic issues, forget a national crime bill, whatever. This is the one, like, we should preserve our ability to stay in power. Even that, you can't even trust the corrupt GOP to get that done. It's truly an abomination. So let me just say, and make it clear to all your senators, look, we don't care how you do it, okay? There's been a lot of talk about, well, maybe we should reinstitute the standing filibuster, like the old school filibuster where you actually have to talk instead of just a standard 60-vote threshold, and maybe that'll help it pass. Maybe you nuke the filibuster. Maybe you just pass it through reconciliation so that way you only need 51 votes to get it done. I don't care, to be honest. I don't think any of us really care about their stupid Senate parliamentary rules. The whole point is what? This is something important. It needs to pass. It's not that crazy or radical, okay? It's just like common sense, and it would help these Republican politicians a lot, but that's why it needs to pass. What else can I say? You know, get it done. Jeez. All this, what about the filibusters? Okay, whatever. Anyways, that said though, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.